Peace. This is Journey Coaching with Ross. I'm Ross Davis L. Thanks for coming. Today we're going on a journey to learn about ourselves, get closer, um, a more scientific look to get to learn ourselves and delve into our inner psyches to become more mature adults. Today's book is going to be King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. Interpreted by me. Now this I'm gonna just go ahead and plug this here now. I did a previous video on Dr. Carl Jung's book, Man and His Symbols, where it was an introduction into the work and studies that Dr. Jung was doing. This builds off of that information. So these are people who kind of followed after him. They call them Jungians in the world of psychology. Here's a picture of the cover if you want to get it. This is the paperback version. I have this version. I'm not sure if there's another cover. It may be. You can order it on Amazon. You might be able to find it at a local bookstore. We're going to be going through the whole book here. It'll be way quicker than reading it on your own. After this video, you should have a solid understanding of what this book is speaking on, and you should hopefully be able to apply some of the information and teachings to your life now to help you to become a more mature adult, or wherever you are at, whatever stage you're at, more mature at that level. The archetypes of king, warrior, magician, and lover are known as the four fundamental structures of the mature male. This was first presented by Dr. Carl G. Jung in a series of lectures at the Institute of Chicago and first published in a series of audio tapes. It is believed that this information will help us understand ourselves, building from what Dr. Jung called the double quarantine. We find the psychological contents and potential images of the four quarters and the two fundamental rational opposites built into these archetypes. This is a high-level introduction to the concepts for those understanding the masculine psyche. This is an introduction to the concepts for understanding the masculine psyche. This is the first of a 5 series on this subject. The purpose of this book is to offer men a simple guide to understand the male psyche. After reading this book, you should have a better understanding of your strengths and weaknesses and provide guidance on the unknown parts of your masculine selfhood. We currently face a crisis in masculine identity. This is demonstrated in the breakdown of the traditional domestic family unit. When fathers leave, it wrecks the psyche of the children by stopping them in their gender identity and being able to relate intimately in a positive way with all people. We believe this is due to 2 factors. The first is the disappearance of the ritual process for initiating boys into manhood. In traditional societies, there are standard definitions of what makes up boy psychology and man psychology. In tribal societies, there are rituals for helping boys of the tribe transition into manhood. Currently in the West, the ritual process has been abandoned or watered down into what is called pseudo initiations. For historical reference, events like the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment discredited the ritual process. What happens to society if the ritual process is discredited? In terms of men, boy psychology runs rampant, such as abusive and violent behaviors towards others, passivity and weakness in life, and oscillating from abuse to weakness. The other factor is called patriarchy by feminists, which has ruled the Western world from the second millennium BCE to the present. This represents the stunted masculine fixated at immature levels and attacks masculinity and femininity in its fullness. It is based on the fears of a boy. When you're attacked in direct or excuse me, passive aggressive ways, when you're being your authentic self, know that it is an attack by the immaturity in others who are afraid of advances towards the mature and feminine fullness. This conclusion is drawn from the study of ancient myths and modern dreams, examination of rapid feminization of the mainline religious community, reflection on rapid changes in roles and gender roles in society, and years of clinical practice. It has been found that men seek their own experience of masculine structures through meditation, prayer, and active imagination. The closer they get in touch with their inner archetypes of mature masculinity, they can heal themselves. Part one, from boy psychology to man psychology. These are the things that change boys to men. New Edition voice. That's a group, but that's neither here nor there. Crisis in masculine, the crisis in the masculine ritual process. What does it mean when someone can't get themselves together? It means that on a deep level, they are not experiencing their archetypes and they are fragmented. They probably have not undergone a ritual initiation into manhood, and he remains a boy. This is often at no fault of his own. Anthropologists agree that cave sanctuaries were created partly by men, for men, and for ritual initiation of boys into male responsibility and masculine spirituality. There are ritual initiatory processes that survive in tribal cultures around the world. These ritual processes enable their children to achieve what could be called calm and secure maturity. We may see ritual processes enacted in movies today. Movies are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, like ancient folk tales and myths. Often, the themes of initiatory process for men and women is hidden. It can be said that life is an attempt to move from a lower form of experience and consciousness to a higher one, from a scattered identity to to a structured identity. Today's culture has pseudo-ritual initiations for men. If you think of military, gangs, prisons, Greek life, fraternities, sororities for women. And this is due to two reasons. The first, the process often creates a skewed form of masculinity, where it becomes an acting out adolescent and achieves a level of development equal to that expressed by society, but in a counterculture form. Think Fight Club. These often amplify the ego striving for power and control in a new form that is regulated by other adolescents. These will never produce men because boy psychology is concerned with the struggle for dominance of others in some form or another. Man psychology requires the death of the boy ego, symbolic of the psychological or spiritual death of the old ways of being, doing, and thinking, and feeling as well, and a submission to the power of the mature masculine energies. The second factor in most initiations in modern society are pseudo initiations. And this is because they lack containment. A ritual is contained by two things. One is sacred space, which is hollow space that must be sealed from outside influence. Initiates are often put through various trials until they learn to submit to the pain of life, the ritual elders, and the masculine traditions and myths of the society. They are taught all the customs of men and then released from the sacred space when they've successfully completed the ordeal and been reborn as men. The second is the ritual elder, a wise man who is trustworthy and can lead the initiate through the process and deliver him intact and enhanced on the other side. Ritual elders are in short supply. The ritual elder knows all the customs and lives out a vision of mature masculinity. The modern crisis in mature masculinity makes it every man for himself. Many of us seek the mature father who most likely didn't exist in our lives and won't appear. Excuse me. Masculine potentials. Remember this image. It's a foreshadowing of what's to come. The absent father, the immature father, the lack of meaningful ritual processes, and the scarcity of ritual elders can be corrected. Deep inside every man is the potential for the calm and positive mature masculine. Jungians refer to these as archetypes. Jung found that every person's psyche is grounded in the collective unconscious, made up of instinctual patterns and energy configurations, probably inherited genetically. These provide foundations of our behavior, thinking, feeling, and characteristic human reactions. Jung related these to animal instincts. The phenomenon called imprinting applies to humans as well. We are wired for mother and father and many other human relationships, as well as all forms of human experience. Though our physical relationships may fall short, the archetype is always present. We can sometimes confuse our parents with our archetypes. Archetypical patterns can be skewed by encounters with people in our outer world and can manifest as psychological problems. If our parents were good enough, then we can experience and access our archetypes in a positive way. The existence of archetypes is well documented by clinical evidence from dreams and daydreams of patients, observations of patterns of human behavior, and in-depth studies of mythology the world over. Jungians found that every man has a feminine sub-personality called the anima, made up of feminine archetypes, and every woman has an animus, made up of masculine archetypes. All humans can access the archetypes to a greater or lesser degree. We do this in our interrelating with each other. This field is actively being discussed and revised as our knowledge about archetypes increase. We are beginning to sort out in a systematic way the inner human world. We want to show men how they can access these positive archetypical potentials for their own benefit and for the benefit of those around them. Boy psychology. The structures of the archetypes. Now is when you'll be thinking back to that image that I said was a foreshadow. Um, you can get these slides on the website, and there will also be available the outline that's used to actually help record this on the website as well. You screenshot that picture or do whatever you need. Keep rewatching the video. It's always an option. That way you can remember the image of the structures, the potentials. The structure of the archetypes. Many men are boys pretending to be men and are fixated at an immature level. When this happens, it causes us to act out our hidden boyishness. The boy inside is a source of playfulness, pleasure, fun, energy, a type of open mindedness. It is ready for adventure and the future. There's another side that remains childish in interactions within us and others when manhood is required. Each archetype in the male psyche has a triune pyramid structure. That's what was shown on the slide. At the apex is the archetype in its fullness. The bottom has the bipolar dysfunctional shadow forms. A lack of cohesion in the psyche is always a symptom of inadequate development. As the personality of the boy matures into its appropriate stage of development, the poles of the shadow become integrated and unified, or more unified. Some boys seem more mature than others because they are accessing the boyhood archetypes more fully than their peers. Boys should feel their inner hero and see themselves as such, but many get caught in a shadow form of the hero. Different archetypes come on at different times. The first archetype to activate is the divine child, followed by the precocious child and Oedipal child. Lastly is the hero. There are mixtures of archetypal influence throughout development. Each archetype of the boy psychology gives rise to each of the mature archetypes of masculinity. The divine child becomes the king. The precocious child becomes the magician. The Oedipal child becomes the lover. The hero becomes the warrior. The adult man does not lose his boyishness, and the archetypes of boyhood do not go away. He transcends the archetypes of boyhood and builds on them. The resulting structure of the mature masculine self is a pyramid over a pyramid. Pyramids are the universal symbol of human selfhood and civilization. The divine child, the most primal of the boyish archetypes. He is the center of the universe, and everyone else is here for his benefit. This is a common theme in many myths, religions, and dreams. Often in therapy sessions, the urge to have children accompanies the dreams. It's found that that urge accompanies the dreams. These events signal something new, creative, fresh, and innocent being born in him. When this happens, an attack on it follows, and we must protect our new psychological life. Different schools of psychology call the archetype of the divine child different names, but each pick up on the two aspects of this energy. Freud called it the primitive or infantile desires, amoral, forceful, and full of godlike pretensions, concerned only about the needs of self. Alfred Adler, the hidden power drive, the hidden superiority complex that covers the real sense of vulnerability, weakness, and inferiority. Heinz Kohut, father of self-psychology, speaks of the grandiose self-organization, which is demanding of self and others in ways that can never be fulfilled. Recent psychoanalytic theory suggests that people who are possessed or identify with this are expressing narcissistic personality disorder. Excuse me. Carl Jung, his view of the divine child, viewed the divine child as a vital part of the archetypical self, the source of life, and produces a sense of well-being, enthusiasm for life, peace, and joy. Accessing the divine child To properly access the divine, this archetype, we must knowing, we must acknowledge and not identify with it, to love and admire the creativity and beauty of the archetype. Because if not, we will not see the possibilities of life or seize the opportunities. Most men need to get in touch with their creativity. We live in a world of mediocrity, and we encourage greatness in men. We need to ask, how are we honoring or not honoring our inner creative child? If we're not feeling him in our personal lives and in our work, then we must ask ourselves, how are we blocking him? We all are manifesting the high chair tyrant or weakling prince, or both to some degree. The shadow form, the high chair tyrant. Characteristics include arrogance, childishness, irresponsibility, and tantrums. All of this is what psychologists call inflation or pathological narcissism. He must learn that he is not the center of the universe and it does not exist to fulfill his every need, but it will nurture him, just not as a god. When the high chair tyrant attacks the man, he becomes a perfectionist and berates himself. When he doesn't meet his standards, physical symptoms include ulcers, sickness, and heart attacks. And these are usually side effects of that perfectionism. Psychologically, he becomes a sociopath. It is said that the divine child wants everything to flow towards him and doesn't want to do anything. The weakling prince is the opposite of the high chair tyrant, in that he rarely throws tantrums. As with all bipolar disorders, the ego possessed by one pole will oscillate between the two, switching from tyrannical outbursts to depressed passivity. Precocious child. This manifests when the boy is eager to learn and when he wants to share knowledge with others. He wants to know the why in everything. Also, he is usually multi-talented. This archetype is the source of the child prodigy and is often prone to introversion and reflection and can see connections in things. Shadow form, the know-it-all trickster. One of the bipolar shadow forms that can be carried into adulthood and cause men to be immature in their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. They influence us to enjoy intimidating others, maybe a know-it-all in any subject or activity. He makes enemies by attempting to dominate conversations and turning discussions into lectures and arguments, depreciating those who don't know as much or hold different opinions when he doesn't know as much as he thinks. A positive side of the know-it-all is deflating egos, our own and others, spotting when and how we are inflated and identify as such, and then exposes us. He is a troublemaker for the sake of truth. How does he work? Hubris leads to nemesis, is how. This can lead to isolation. The positive aspect is to expose lies, but if left unchecked, it can become negative and destructive aspect. He doesn't want to work for anything. This is the energy that seeks to fall great men for the sake of it. I think the Batman and Joker's relationship. It causes men to see all men in power as corrupt and abusive, but won't take the responsibility for his actions. His energy comes from envy. The less a man is in touch with his talents and abilities, the more he will envy others. Envy blocks creativity and stems from a lack of connection with the divine child. The dummy, the other pole that lacks personality, vigor, and creativity, frequently is labeled a slow learner and may miss jokes and appear to be physically inept. However, this is usually a ruse and hides his hidden grandiosity that's too important to come out. The Oedipal child. All immature archetypical energies are overly tied to mother and are deficient in their experience of the nurturing and mature masculine. If he can access this archetype positively, he is passionate and has a sense of wonder and a deep appreciation for connectedness with himself, others, and all things. He is warm, related, affectionate, and expressive. His connectedness comes from a longing for the great mother. The mama's boy, a bipolar shadow form that causes a boy to fantasize about marrying his mother and taking her away from his father. If there is no father or a weak one, this cause that causes the urge to be stronger. The Oedipus complex comes from Freud, who saw similarities to the Greek story of Oedipus, who was unconsciously inflated and was struck down by the gods for killing his father and marrying his mother. Progenerates are gods to their children. There is also the story of Adonis, who became the lover of the goddess Aphrodite. He cannot be bound to one woman. He is called autocratic and masturbates often. He is seeking to experience his masculinity. Instead, he affirms to be mortal and hoping to experience the great phallus that experiences all women. He wants to he wants to just be and not do what's necessary to have union with a physical woman with all her complex feelings. The dreamer, the other side, takes the Oedipal child's impulses and adds a level of passivity by causing the boy to feel isolated from all human relationships. Relationships are with intangible things in his imagination. He accomplishes little and appears withdrawn and depressed. His dreams are typically melancholy or highly idyllic and ethereal. He is dishonest unintentionally. His isolated, ethereal behavior may hide the mama's boy. Hero. There's a lot of confusion on this archetype. It is assumed that the heroic approach to life or a task is the noblest, but this is a half truth. This is the most advanced form of boy psychology and characterizes the adolescent development. Why is the hero a part of our psyches? It motivates the boy's ego to break with his mother and face the task that life has assigned, to establish his independence and competence, to experience his abilities and push his limits in the world. Outsiders often attack a man's inner hero. Modern society does not want heroes. It prefers laziness and self-involvement. Only the heroic consciousness will be able to change the current course of history. What is the end of the hero? Universally, he dies and transformed into a god, which means that a man has met his limitations, his own dark side. He has overcome the mother and realized his inability to love the princess. True humility has two key parts: knowing our limitations and getting the necessary help. Shadow forms, the grand standard bully. Under the influence of the bully, boys intend to impress others. He must be superior to those around him, and when challenged, he can become abusive to cover his fears. He has an inflated idea of his importance and abilities. He believes he is invulnerable and that the impossible dream is his to achieve. The hero is overly tied to mother, but the hero desires to overcome her and assert his masculinity. His downfall is not knowing his own limitations. When modern societal world view is skewed in reference to human limitations, when we do not face our true limitations, we are inflated and eventually they are called to be accounted for. The coward, the opposite pole of this shadow form, shows an extreme reluctance to stand up for himself in confrontations and claim to be manly by walking away but feel terrible inside. When pushed to his limit, his inner grandstander bully will lash out. Man psychology. It is very difficult to develop to your full potential. The archetypes of boyhood are the building blocks for manhood. Our goal is to continually build the mature masculine and become the lord of the four quarters. There are many techniques to help achieve this, such as dream analysis, re entering and changing our dreams, active imagination, psychotherapy, meditation, prayer, mystical ritual processes with spiritual elders, various forms of spiritual discipline, and other methods of turning boys into men. The four major forms of mature masculine energies are king, warrior, magician, and lover. They all overlap and enrich each other. A good king is always a warrior, magician, and lover, and vice versa. The archetypes are mysterious entities or energies. They remain hidden, but we experience their effects in art, poetry, music, religion, scientific discoveries, patterns of behavior, thoughts, and feelings. Our egos are like the chair of a board, and the members are the archetypes. Each archetype needs to be heard and stand on its own, but the ego makes the final decision. Hostile environments lead to stunting, twisting, and mutating of an organism, which are typically the environments that we are in that attack our psyche, as stated earlier. There is a saying in psychology that we must take responsibility for what we're not responsible for, meaning we are not responsible for what happened that stunted us in our early years when our personalities were forming. We are no longer in an institutional age, but a psychological one. Excuse me. Meaning, what used to be done for us, we now must do internally. We have a culture of individuals rather than collective. 2, decoding the male psyche, the four archetypes of the mature masculine. The king. The king is primal in all men and has the same dynamic with the other three archetypes of the mature masculine potentials as the divine child and is important and is most important. The king archetype is like God in the masculine form in men. There are many names for this energy. The atom, primordial man, philosophers call it anthropopause, Hindus call it Atman, Jews and Christians call it in the image of God. Freud called it the primal father of the primal horde. Historically, kings are sacred. It is the kingship or king energy itself that is important, not the man. It's been observed through history that kings were ritually killed when their inability to live out the king archetype began to fail. It was important that the generative power of the king not be tied to the fate of an aging and feeble mortal. With a raising of a new king, the king energy is renewed in the realm and its people, and it is dangerous for a man to identify with the king energy because he can die prematurely, fulfilling the ancient pattern. John Perry, a psychotherapist, found that the king's power to heal by reorganizing the personality and dreams and visions of schizophrenic patients. He speaks about it in his book, Roots of, Roots of Renewal in Myth and Madness. He saw in his patients' dreams and visions the mythic battles between the king and chaos and the eventual enthronement of the king, realizing that the king is the center of the universe. This same phenomenon happens to the ego in its progression from boy to man psychology. The two functions of the king in his fullness. The first is ordering. The king sits on the primeval hill, according to Egyptian mythos, and from there all creation radiates in a geometrical form out to every part of the realm. The world is defined as the part of reality that is organized and ordered by the king. Anything outside of his influence is chaos and demonic. This energy shows up everywhere in ancient mythology and in ancient interpretations of actual history. Words define our reality in our worlds. We organize our lives and worlds by the concepts, our thoughts about them, and we can only think in terms of words. In ancient thought, the world radiates from the center, but it is geometrically organized into four quarters. It is a circle divided by a cross, the top view of a pyramid. Ancient maps were drawn schematically with this idea. What this function, what this function of the king energy does is be a mortal king, is to embody for the people of the realm the ordering principle of the divine world. The human king does this by codifying laws. He receives laws from the king energy and passes them on to the nation. This order expressed in the kingdom is the manifestation of the ordering of the excuse me. It's the manifestation of the ordering thoughts of the creator God. In ancient Egyptian mythology, this was the thought of as the god Ptah or the goddess Ma'at, which was carried into Hebrew thought in the figure of wisdom in the biblical books of Proverbs, and into Greek and Christian ideas of Christ as the Logos. Hinduism calls it right order. In China, it's called the Tao or the Way. It is imperative that the man operating under the archetype of the king lives in order in his own life, and secondarily, to enforce it in his kingdom. He is to do this as a servant and earthly embodiment of the archetype, which maintains order in the spiritual and unconscious realms. In modern dysfunctional families, when there is an immature, weak, or absent father, the king energy is not sufficiently present. The family often is in disorder and chaos. The second is providing fertility and blessing. The second function of the king is to provide fertility and blessings. In ancient myths, it recognized the union of male and female was generative on the physical plane. However, in the creation of civilization and technology, and in the mastery of the natural world, the masculine generative energies are most prominent. The sacred king in the ancient times became the primary expression of the life force, libido of the cosmos. Many of the modern beliefs come from ancient patriarchs. The capacity to be generative was also the result of his creative ordering. This is expressed in the Bible as the commands to walk in the ways of God and to be fruitful and multiply. When a wife could not produce children, she would find another wife or concubine for her husband so he could continue his fertility function. The king was the embodiment of the king energy, and the lamb was his wife that he was wed to, or is wed to. To give blessings, which is a psychological or spiritual event. The good king mirrors and affirms others who deserve it. He does this by seeing them in his audience at the palace and in the psychological sense, noticing them in their true worth. The good king delights in promoting good men to positions of responsibility in his kingdom. Being blessed has tremendous psychological consequences. There are studies that show that our bodies change chemically when we feel valued, praised, and blessed. Young men today are starving for blessings from older men, and is why they cannot get it together. Many men fall short of being a good king. What are the qualities of a good king? In its fullness, it possesses the qualities of order, reasonable and rational patterning, integration, and integrity in the masculine psyche. It brings calm, mediates vitality, life force, and joy. It brings maintenance and balance. It defends our sense of inner order, integrity, and purpose, central calmness about who we are, and our security in our masculine identity. This energy seeks peace and stability, orderly growth, and nurturing for all people and for the world. The king cares about the realm and is the steward of nature and human society. In the warrior, it represents aggressive might when order is threatened. It is the wise and discerning. It is wise and discerning for the magician and acts out of deep knowingness. It delights in us and for others with the lover and shows it through words of authentic praise and, and concrete actions that enhance our lives. The Shadow King, the tyrant. Oh man. Okay. Sorry about that. Accessing the king, we must have cognitive distance from the king energy. Realistic greatness in adult life involves recognizing our proper relationship to it and other mature masculine energies. The ego must think of itself as a steward of the king energy for the benefit of all within its realm. Two ways to look at the difference between the active and passive poles of the shadow of the king energy. View the structure as a triangular or triune and talk about the ego's disidentification or identification from the archetype in its fullness. If identified with the result, its inflation of the ego and fixation at immature level of development. If extreme disidentification, the ego is deprived of access of the archetype. The tyrant king is his own priority, causing the psyche to destabilize. This is called usurpation syndrome. The problem arises when we feel we lost effective touch with the king energy, consequently falling into a dependent personality disorder, a condition where we project our king energy onto someone externally. This happens in families when husbands become too attentive to their wives' moods and fear to take initiative because of attacking anger their actions may bring. Also, in children, when their parents do not allow them to develop sufficient levels of independence, of will, and purpose, and the children remain under the wing. In work, it is when we become too dependent on the power and the whims of the boss, or when we feel we can't do things around coworkers. It happens with nations when the people view themselves as peasants and turn over all of the power to the ruler. This abdication syndrome is a hallmark of a weakling and is just as disastrous as usurpation syndrome. When we give the power to others, we can be led into lost battles, abuse in our family, mass murder, or abandoned to our underlying weakness. When we access the king energy correctly, we feel centered and calm, and we speak from an inner authority. We have the capacity to mirror, care for, and bless ourselves and others. We will have spirituality and will know the truth of the central commandment around which all human life seems to be based. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might and thy neighbor as thyself. Shadow King, the tyrant and the weakling. We experience very little of the king energy in its fullness. The king has an active tyrant and passive weakling bipolar shadow structure. The tyrant hates, fears, and envies new life because the new life is a threat to his kingship. He is not centered, calm, or regenerative, and is destructive. He is ruthless in the pursuit of his self-interest. He hates all beauty, innocence, strength, talent, life energy because he is afraid of his own weakness and underlying lack of potency. His attacks can be verbal, psychological, or physical. The Tyrant King can manifest in any of us at various points in time. He is sensitive to criticism and will feel deflated and weak, but will hide behind the threatening front. Behind the tyrant lies the weakling. The weakling feels as if he can't be identified with the king energy, then he is worthless, which explains the drive to be praised and his attacks on the weak being projections of his own inner weakling. Those possessed by the weakling lack centeredness, calmness, and security within self and leads to paranoia. He lives in fear because his oppressive behavior begs for in-kind response. We are all able to see the tyrant's relationship to the high chair tyrant. Grandiosity is normal to a degree in the divine child. Parents need to give the divine child in their child the right amount of adoration and affirmation so they can let the child down easily from their high chair. They must teach him not to identify as the divine child. If not, he may carry that identification into adulthood. This is one way the Shadow King is formed. The other is when parents abuse their child and attack his grandiosity from the beginning. His grandiosity slips into the unconscious, and he may fall to the influence of the weakling prince. For him, the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, is true. The warrior. Today is a time when people are generally uncomfortable with the warrior form of masculine energy. Women, especially, since they have often been the most direct victims of it in its shadow form. Aggressive energy is looked upon with deep suspicion and fear. This is the age of the soft masculine in the West, and when feminists raise voices against the warrior energy. Ironically, those who would cut off masculine aggressiveness fall under the power of this archetype. It lives on despite our conscious attitudes towards it and goes underground to eventually resurface as emotional or physical violence. Robert Ardrey, in two controversial books, African Genesis and the Territorial Imperative, claim that humans are governed by instincts, the same instincts that govern the feelings and behaviors of other animals. There are great warrior traditions in nearly every culture. Some psychologists see human aggressiveness emerging out of infantile rage, the child's natural reaction to what is called poisonous pedagogy, the abuse of babies on a massive scale. The believe we believe there is truth to this considering the shadow warrior, but we believe the warrior shouldn't be identified with human rage in a simple way. We believe the primary masculine energy persists because the warrior is a basic building block of masculine psychology. Excuse me. Excuse me. When we examine the warrior traditions closely, we see what has been accomplished in history. The ancient Egyptians spread their civilization by conquest, and because of this, Egyptian morality, ethics, and fundamental religious ideas became a part of Western system and of ethics and spirituality. It is the same about Mesopotamian civilizations, carrying knowledge and insights into future civilizations. In India, the warrior class conquered and stabilized the Indian subcontinent and set up conditions for India to become the spiritual center of the world. In Iraq, the Zoroastrian warrior kings spread the religion throughout the Near East. It had a profound impact on Judaism and Christianity. The biblical Hebrews were originally a warrior people and followed a warrior god, Yahweh, under King David. The benefits of the new religion included advanced ethical systems based on the warrior's virtues and were consolidated. Through Christianity, many of the Hebrew ideas and values were carried by the European warrior classes to the four corners of the world. Rome preserved the Mediterranean civilization long enough for the Germanic tribes to become semi-civilized before they succeeded in invading the empire and rewriting Western history. That from the 15th century on has become the history of the world. That from the 15th century has become the history of the world. In North America, the native Moorish American men lived noble lives and with courage and the capacity to endure great pain and hardship, defending their people against an overwhelming foe. The energy is universally present in men and in the civilizations we create, defend, and extend. It is vital in our world building and plays an important role in extending the benefits of the highest human virtues and cultural achievements to all of humanity. We must ask, why is it so present within us? What are the warrior's functions in the evolution of human life? And what is his purpose in the psyches of individual men? What are the positive qualities and how can they help us in our personal lives and in our work? The warrior in his fullness. The characteristics of the warrior in his fullness is a way of life. Aggressiveness is defined as a stance towards life that rouses, energizes, and motivates us to handle and manage life's tasks and problems. Proper aggression in all situations is ideal and is achieved through clarity of thinking and discernment. The warrior is always alert and knows how to focus his mind and body. Due to his clarity of mind, he is strategist, a strategist, and a tactician. He accurately assesses his own strength and skill. A difference between the warrior and the hero is that the hero does not know his limitations, while the warrior assesses his in every situation. Sometimes the maxim forward, always forward means shifting tactics, a flexibility of strategy stemming from evaluation. All warrior traditions affirm that training helps to reach clarity of mind, and the awareness of death makes every act counts, and there is no time for hesitation. He engages life and never withdraws. Overthinking leads to doubt. Doubt leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to inaction, and inaction leads to losing the battle. His actions are second nature due to the training of self-discipline. He never exerts more energy than required. His skill, interest is in mastering technology that helps him reach his goal. He controls his mind, attitude, and his body, leading to a positive mental attitude and an unconquerable spirit. Great courage, and he is responsible for his actions and self-discipline. Discipline means he's able to develop control and mastery over his mind, body, and has capacity to withstand pain. The warrior energy shows what we can hold. Excuse me. The warrior energy shows that we can hold a transpersonal commitment by having loyalty tied to a cause, God, people, task, or nation. It makes all personal relationships relative to the central cause or commitment. He is organized around his central commitment, which eliminates a lot of human pettiness. This highlights another difference in the warrior and the hero. The warrior does not live to gratify his personal needs and wishes his physical appetites. The warrior does not live to gratify his personal needs and wishes of his physical appetites, but to hone himself into an efficient spiritual machine, trained to bear the unbearable in service to the transpersonal goal. He is inaccessible in his decision making and aloof. Inaccessible means you touch the world around you sparingly with emotional detachment. This attitude is part of the clarity of thinking. The warrior is often a destroyer of what needs to be destroyed for something new. When the warrior energy relates to the king energy, a man accessing these powers can consciously steward the realm with decisive actions, clear thinking, discipline, courage, creativity, and generativity. When with the magician, a man can achieve mastery and control over himself and his weapons. It allows him to channel and direct power to accomplish his goals. With the lover, he has compassion and relates to all things. When the warrior energy is operating solo, the results can be disastrous. This energy is emotionally detached, and this is apparent with women who are only for sex and fun. This sheds lights on prostitutes being around military bases and the raping of conquered women. In relationships and families, wives and girlfriends are often feel alienated and rejected, competing with a man's true love. Often these men have affairs with women who admire from a distance their masculine warrior proficiency and dedication. The shadow warrior, the sadist, and the masochist. The problems of the warrior's emotional detachment becomes hurtful and destructive to a man when he is caught in one of the shadow aspects. This detachment can lead to cruelty, and because he is vulnerable in relatedness, he must have his mind and feelings under control, not repressed. There are two types of cruelty: cruelty with passion, the sadist. The warrior, as an avenging spirit, comes when we are frightened and angry in stressful situations of actual combat and other stressful situations. The sadist loves carnage and cruelty and hates the weak, helpless, and vulnerable. Concerning his insecurity, he is violent and emotional, which causes the desperation of the hero to stand against the power of the feminine, which evokes the cowardly pole of the hero's shadow. We all may become vulnerable to the sadistic warrior, but is rampant among those with compulsive personality disorders. Cruelty without passion, the cowardly masochist. The passive side of the shadow, the warrior that lies beneath the sadist. He projects his warrior energy onto others, and it causes him to feel powerless. He is unable to defend himself and allows others to push him around and keeps his self-respect. He will take abuse for too long and then explode in a sadistic outburst, verbal or physical violence. The oscillation from active to passive poles of the shadow is characteristic of dysfunctional systems. All of us can be susceptible to this energy. Accessing the warrior. We need to ask ourselves, in what ways are we failing to access properly the masculine energy potentials available to us? If accessing the warrior appropriately, we will be energetic, decisive, courageous, enduring, and loyal to something greater than ourselves. We must balance this energy with the other mature masculine energies. Then we will be detached, warm, compassionate, appreciative, and generative. We will care for ourselves and others. Our war making will be for creating something new, just, and free. Excuse me. Blow my nose again. Right, back. The magician. Often we mistakenly think we are different from our ancient ancestors with our knowledge and technology. Today, as in the past, the magician energy drives civilization. He is the knower and master of technology. He can fulfill these functions in part by his use of ritual initiatory processes. Excuse me. He is a ritual elder that guides the process of transformation. The human magician is always an initiate himself and is tasked to initiate others. He is an initiate of secret knowledge of all kinds, all knowledge that takes special training to acquire. There is no guarantee of success in any initiation. Historical background. It is thought by some anthropologists that in the past, the masculine energies of the king, warrior, magician, and lover were once inseparable and manifested in the chief in a holistic way. In modern times, Aboriginal societies have these separated. There is the king or chief, the chief's warriors, and the magician, whose specialty is knowing something that others don't. The people go to the magician with their questions, problems, pains, and diseases. His knowledge makes him a master at containing and channeling power. One aspect of the magician's knowing is the capacity to deflate our arrogance. It is the BS detector and sees through denial and uses discernment. The court magician, in effect, was the king's psychotherapist. There's a sect of Christianity called Gnosticism. Gnosis is a Greek word for knowing on a deep psychological or spiritual level. They taught initiates how to discover their unconscious motives and drives, how to moor their delusions, and how to reach oneness with the center that lies deep within. Acquiring knowledge is difficult and painful work that most don't want to do. The tradition of alchemy that arose in the Middle Ages is a continuation of the pursuit of secret knowledge. The aim was to turn base metals into gold, which it failed at. However, this is a spiritual practice or technique to help the alchemists achieve insight, self-awareness, and personal transformation. Alchemy also helped to give rise to modern science, which is divided into two aspects. Theoretical science, which is the knowing aspect of the magician, and applied science, which is the technical aspect. This is an age of the magician because it is a technological age in the materialistic concern, with understanding and having power over nature. In terms of the non-material, psychological, or spiritual, the magician energy is lacking. It is lacking in the areas of personal growth and transformation. Our age is of personal and gender identity chaos, and chaos is always due to the inadequate access of the magician in a vital area of life. Two sciences, subatomic physics and death psychology, carry on the work of the ancient magician in a holistic way, combining the material and psychological sides of the magician energy. Subatomic physics is like Eastern mysticism in its approaches, the insights of Hinduism and Taoism. They are discovering a micro world beneath our solid macro world. The two behave differently in terms of particles and waves. A particle can appear to be in two places at once without being divided. Matter loses its solidity and seems to gather in energy at localized spots for periods of time. Energy seems to arise out of nowhere. The same is true in depth psychology. Jung found similarities between his discovery of archetypes in the human psyche and quantum physics. Both schools of science show that things are not what they seem. What we experience as normal reality is only a fraction of what is going on. This is the realm of the magician. The revelation of occult knowledge must be measured out because it was hidden for a reason from the ego. There are some people who tap into other occult practices who seek initiation into higher planes by contacting entities to teach them. This can be used for good or evil. For all ritual processes and deep knowing and controlling of energies, there is an issue of sacred space, which is the container of raw power that insulates and channels the energies that are drawn into it. With subatomic physics, we discovered our knowledge and technology of containment is inadequate. The same is true in psychotherapy. The issue of containment arises out of group therapy. Often, no one involved understands the forces that could be released. The magician in his fullness. The magician is the archetype of awareness and insight, knowledge of anything hidden. It governs the observing ego, as called in psychology. The ego is vital to our survival and is to observe and monitor information coming in from internal and external sources and make decisions. The observing ego is detached from the ordinary flow of daily events. The magician, in combination with the observing ego, keeps us separated from the powers of the other archetypes in our lives. Many human magicians use their knowledge and technical proficiencies for the benefit of others and themselves. The magician energy is present in the warrior in the form of clear thinking. Whenever we're faced with an impossible decision in our daily life, we access the magician to decide. This also makes the magician the archetype of thoughtfulness, reflection, and introversion. The magician often comes online in a crisis because these force us into sacred space due to the difference in the normal space we occupy. Sacred space is somewhere where those who are guided by the magician purposefully go. This can be done by listening to music, doing a hobby, taking a walk, meditating, mental pictures, etc. When they enter their internal sacred space, they are in touch with the magician and they can access solutions from there. The primordial magician in men has manifested most fully as the shaman, who in traditional societies was the healer. He restored the wholeness and fullness of being to individuals and communities. The magician aims at fullness of being for all things through compassionate application of knowledge and technology. Shadow magician, the manipulator and the denying innocent. If this is the age of the magician, then it is also the age of the shadow magician. Behind the propaganda ministries, controlled press briefings, censored news, fake political rallies, lie the magician as manipulator. The active pole of the shadow magician is a power shadow. His interest is maneuvering people by withholding information they may need for their own well-being. He charges heavily for the information he does share. The shadow magician is detached and cruel. He hurts others with cynical detachment from the world, and his subliminal manipulation tactics hurts himself. He is afraid to live. He's eventually he eventually regrets his inaction and is indecisive. By withholding information, he makes himself feel isolated and lonely. Whenever we are detached, unrelated, and withholding the info that we know can help others, or we use knowledge as a weapon, excuse me, to control others or raise our status and wealth or belittle others, we identify with the manipulator. The passive pole is called the naive or innocent one, which is a carryover from the childhood dummy. The man possessed by one's power and status that traditionally comes to the man who is a magician, at least in a societally sanctioned field, but doesn't want to take responsibility to share and teach. He wants to learn enough to derail those making worthwhile efforts. He hides the truth for the sake of achieving and maintaining his status. The motivations of the innocent one come from envy of those who act, live, and want to share. This is because he is envious of life and afraid of people. And afraid people will find him lacking life energy and humble him. His detachment and behavior are designed to hide his inner desolation, lifelessness, and irresponsibility from the world. He is guilty of sins of commission and omission, but hides the motives behind naivete. He is elusive and doesn't engage frontally, keeping us off balance by a process of questioning our intuition about their behavior. Accessing the magician. When accessing the magician appropriately, we will be adding to our professional and personal lives a dimension of clarity, deep understanding and reflection about ourselves and others, and technical skill in our outer work and managing our psychological forces. We can regulate this energy in the other three archetypes. None of them work well on their own, and they all must be mixed. The lover. Erect penis is a sexual symbol and of life force. The ancient peoples, for ancient peoples, blood was a carrier of spirit energy and the soul. When blood stands the penis erect, it incarnates spirit into flesh. The result of the union of human flesh and the divine is always creative and energizing. There are many forms of love. The ancient Greeks spoke of agape, non-erotic love, and the Bible calls brotherly love. Eros is the sense of sexual love, and in a sense of love as bonding and uniting urge of all things. The Romans spoke of amor, the complete union of one body and soul with another. These forms and others are expressions of the lover energy in human life. Excuse me. All right, I'm back. Excuse me about that. Jungians use arrows to talk about lover energy. They also use the Latin term libido to refer to appetite for life. They associate this energy with vividness, aliveness, and passion. It lives in our primal drives for sex, food, well-being, reproduction, creative adaptation to life's hardships, and sense of meaning. The lover's drive is to satisfy those hungers. This is a primary archetype in the psyche because it is sensitive to the outside environment. It expresses what's called sensation function, the function of the psyche that is trained in all details of sensory experience. How does the lover show up in men today? How does he help us survive and flourish? What are the characteristics? The lover in his fullness. This archetype is of play and display of healthy embodiment, of being in the world of pleasure and in one's own body without shame. The lover is deeply sensual, passionate, and connected to all. His sensitivity leads to compassion and empathy. The man accessing the lover is open to the collective unconscious. Jung's collective unconscious is the unconscious of human beings of all species and contains the unconscious memories of all people that have ever lived. The lover's connectedness is not primarily intellectual, but is a feeling. Primal hunger is felt passionately in all of us beneath the surface. He wants to experience the world of sensual experience in its totality. He has an aesthetic consciousness. All of life is art to him and evokes a nuanced feeling. The lover energy arises out of the Oedipal child and is the source of spirituality, especially mysticism. In mystical tradition, the lover energy, though through mystics intuits display the ultimate oneness of all and seeks to experience oneness in daily life, while it still dwells in a mortal, finite man. While feeling the pain and poignancy of the world, he feels great joy as well. Languages are learned through feeling. Even abstract thought is felt through the senses. The man in touch with the lover energy experiences work and the people on the job through aesthetic consciousness. He reads people like a book and is sensitive to their moods and can feel their hidden motives. Others can avoid pain, but the man in touch with the lover must endure it. Love brings joy and pain. Paul is in the Bible explains the authentic love bears all things and endures all things. The man under the lover's influence doesn't want to stop at socially created boundaries and stands against such artificial things. His life is often unconventional and messy because he is opposed to law in the broad sense, with conventional old tensions between sensuality and morality, love and duty. At first glance, the lover energy is opposed to the other energies of the mature masculine. Cultural background. In religious history and cultures, we see a pattern of tension between the lover and the other archetypes of the mature masculine. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which are called moral and ethical religions, have persecuted the lover. There was no room for the lover, at least in his erotic expression. In the Middle Ages, to be a psychic or a nature worshiper was deemed evil by the church, and people were considered evil, witches, Satan worshippers, and were burned at the stake. The book, The Songs of Solomon, is scandalized by many Christians to this day because it is a collection of love poems based on ancient Canaanite fertility rituals. It describes a Moor between a man and a woman. This is reconciled by saying it is allegory. In Orthodox Judaism, the lover is projected onto women and depreciated. Eve was the first to sin, which sets the stage for the notion of women as seductress, who distracts men from their pursuits of holiness. In Islam, women have been depreciated and oppressed. Islam is a religion of warrior energy. The Muslim paradise after death is a lover's territory. Hinduism is different. It is not a moralistic or ethical in the same sense of Western religions. Its spirituality is much more aesthetic and mystical. Hinduism celebrates the oneness of all things and the human oneness with God. It rejoices with it rejoices in the world of form in the realm of senses. Hinduism celebrates the erotic aspect of the lover incarnated in the world in his sacred love poetry and is in the arousing forms of some of its temples. Excuse me. There are two primary ways that the lover manifests: the artist and the psychic. Painters, musicians, poets, sculptors, and writers often mainline the lover. Artists' personal lives are typically messy. They live close to the power of the creative unconscious. Similar way, genuine psychics live in a world of sensation and vibrations of deeply felt intuitions. Their conscious awareness, people's thoughts, people's thoughts and feelings, and from the collective unconscious. We all have premonitions and intuitions about people, situations, or our own future. In those moments, the underlying unity of things is revealed to us, and we are drawn towards the lover. Excuse me. Any artistic or creative endeavor is drawing upon the energies of the lover for creativity. So are connoisseurs. We feel it strongly in our love lives. In our culture, this is the main way that most of us have for getting in touch with the lover. We delight in our beloved and cherish her in all her beauty of body and soul. Through our emotional and physical union, and are transported into a divine world of ecstasy, pleasure, pain, and sorrow. It is important to note the issue of monogamy versus polygamy and promiscuity. Monogamy arises out of the amour from form of love in which one man and one woman give themselves to each other, alone, body, and soul. Monogamy is still our ideal today, at least in the West, but the lover also expresses himself through polygamy, serial monogamy, or promiscuity. The shadow lover, the addicted, and the impotent lover. A man living in the lover's shadow is possessed by energy that works to his destruction and those around him. The most important question a man identified with the addicted lover asks is, why should I put limits on my sensual and sexual experience of this world that holds unending pleasure for me? The primary characteristic of the shadow lover is as addicted is his loneliness. He is not the master of his own fate and becomes the victim of his own sensitivity. He does not like to be limited. There are stories of so-called addicted personalities, people who can't stop eating, drinking, smoking, or using drugs. Lostness shows up in the way that the addict lives for pleasure for the moment only and locks us into immobility from which we cannot escape. The addict's lostness causes him to be restless, constantly searching for something, but he does not know what it is. Monogamy, not in a simple way, can be seen as a product of a man's own centeredness. He is bounded by his own inner structures and senses of masculine being and calm in his inner joy. A man moving from woman to woman compulsively, searching for what he doesn't know, is one whose inner structures have not yet solidified because he is fragmented and not centered. For the addict, the world presents itself as tempting pieces of a lost whole. This is another way of talking about idolatry. The addicted lover unconsciously invests pieces of his experience with the power of unity that he can never experience. This shows up in porn collections. There's an unconscious inflation in this idolatry. The man captured by the addicted lover is unconsciously identifying himself with God as lover. Restlessness is a search for a way out. He is really possessed by the feminine unconscious and overwhelmed by it. We can see the addict as a carryover from childhood of the absorption into the mother as the mama's boy. The man is struggling to get out of the mother. The need to detach from and contain the power of the unconscious go a long way towards accounting for masculine sexual perversions, especially those that show up in bondage and violent sexual humiliation of women. We can see these acts as attempts to disempower the unconscious. He must learn that the lack of discipline resulting affairs and authority issues will get him in trouble. If we feel we are out of touch with the lover and in his fullness, we become possessed by the impotent lover and will experience our lives in an unfeeling way. We will describe symptoms psychologists call flattened effect. We will become depressed. Those who are habitually possessed by the impotent lover are chronically depressed. Depression can lead to what's known to psychologists as dissociative phenomena, a condition in which a client may start speaking about himself in third person. When depressed, we aren't motivated to do things we want to do or must do. It isn't just the lack of vision that signifies the power of the impotent lover in a man's life. It is also the absence of an erect and eager penis. This man's sex life is stale. He is sexually inactive for various reasons. In conjunction to those, the man is either regressing to a pre-sexual boy or is mainlining either the king, warrior, or magician, or a combination of the three. Accessing the lover. If appropriately accessing the lover and keeping our ego structure strong, we feel related, connected, alive, enthusiastic, compassionate, empathetic, energized, and romantic about our lives, our goals, our work, and our achievements. It is the lover that gives us a sense of meaning. What we have been calling spirituality is the lover, who is the source of longing for a better world. He is an idealist and dreamer. The lover keeps the other masculine energies humane. The king, warrior, and magician harmonize well because without the lover, they are essentially detached from life. They need the lover to keep from becoming sadistic. The lover needs them as well. The lover without boundaries needs the king to define limits for him, to give structure, to order his chaos, so that it can be channeled creatively. Jeez. Without limits, the lover turns negative and destructive. The lover needs the warrior to be able to act decisively and to detach from sensuality. The lover needs the magician to help him back off from the effects of his emotions, to reflect, to have a more objective perspective, to disconnect, to see the big picture, and to experience the reality beneath the seeming. Many have repressed the lover so much that it has become hard to feel passionate about anything in our lives. Let us find the spontaneity. Geez, spontaneity. Yeah, spontaneity. Yeah, I feel like I'm pronouncing that wrong. Being spontaneous. You know, enjoy of life inside ourselves. Then we will live our lives more abundantly and enable others to live. Conclusion. May never have been a time when the archetypes of the mature masculine were dominant in human life. It seems we as a species live under infantilism. Infantilism. Thus, patriarchy is really the rule of boys, but at least there used to be structures and systems for evoking a greater level of masculine maturity than in our anti-system, anti-ritual, anti-symbol world today. Ours is a world that needs masculine energies in their maturity more urgently than before. The evolutionary process placed resources of the four masculine archetypes within every man and called upon them in different periods of human history to solve difficult problems, to organize laws out of chaos, to stimulate creativity and generativity, to gain capacity to steward nature internally and outwardly, and to arouse appreciation of relatedness. If this is an age of individualism, then let us be individuals, individual men who will, with the benevolence of ancient kings, The courage and decisiveness of ancient warriors, the wisdom of magicians, and the passion of lovers move energetically to take up the challenge of saving the world. There is work enough to keep every man busy for the foreseeable future. Our effectiveness in meeting these challenges is directly related to how individual men meet the challenges of their own immaturity. Some techniques that you can be used are suggested to be used from the book. Here are 4 techniques for reconnecting appropriately with archetypes of masculine maturity. The first step is critical self-appraisal. There is no use of asking if the shadow side of the archetypes are showing up in our lives. The realistic and honest question is, how are they manifesting in our lives? The key to maturity is to become humble. Humility is not humiliation. True humility consists of knowing our limitations and getting the help we need. The first technique is called active imagination. Active imagination dialogue, which is the conscious ego enters dialogue with various unconscious entities and other points of view within. Behind these different points of view lie the archetypes. There's a saying, it's okay to talk to yourself as long as you don't answer. But we do answer ourselves by what psychology calls an autonomous complex. And behind it, what we are calling a pole in the archetypal shadow. It pays to face these energies forms before they make us say and do things we regret. Often conducting a dialogue with inner opponents usually forms immature masculine energies that will diffuse much easier. What they want is to be noticed, honored, and taken seriously. Once they are honored and their feelings validated, they no longer need to act out through our lives. Excuse me. Back. Next is invocation, where we access the masculine archetypes in their fullness as positive energy forms. On average, we all live unintentionally invoking images and thoughts that may or may not be helpful to us. Invocation is a conscious, focused way of calling up the images you want to see. Excuse me. Imaging affects our moods, our attitudes, the way we look at things, and what we do. It is important what thoughts and images we are invoking. If possible, find a quiet place and time. Clear your mind and relax as best you can. Focus on images that have mental pictures and spoken words. It is useful to spend some time looking for images of the king, warrior, magician, and lover. This is comparable to prayer. Thirdly, is admiring men. Mature men need to admire other men, living and dead. We must contact with older men whom we can look up to. If such a man is not available to us personally, we must read their biographies and become familiar with their words and deeds. These men need not be perfect. The realization of the completely whole man can never be achieved. Movement towards wholeness is possible, and every man is responsible for it. Fourthly, it's acting as if. You begin by acting like the character. You act kingly even if you've been fired from your job and your wife left you. The show must go on, and others depend on you to play your part. Soon you will start to feel like a king, etc. Final word. This is concerned about helping men to take responsibility for the destructiveness of immature forms of masculinity. At the same time, it is clear the world is overpopulated with immature men and tyrannical and abusive little girls pretending to be women. It's time for men to stop accepting the blame for everything that is wrong in the world. Men should never feel apologetic about being their gender. They should never be concerned with the maturation and the stewardship of that gender and of the larger world. The enemy of both sexes is infantile grandiosity and splitting of the self that results from it. A word of encouragement. Any transformative process takes time and effort. We do our homework from the conscious and unconscious if approached in the right way. Respond to our questions, our needs, and our woundedness in healing and generative ways. Initiation is really a matter of exploring the outer reaches of inner space. If contemporary men could take the task of their own initiation from boyhood to manhood as seriously as tribal forebears, then we may witness the end of then we may witness the end of the beginning of our species. All right, that's what I have for the breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it and were able to gain some new insights, maybe some new techniques, uh, and grasp these concepts that were presented that we all have internally that makes us very similar, and is more of the reflection of God than our outward forms. Again, I have these slides available in the outline script that I used that I was reading from. If you want it, they will be available for uh, for a monetary compensation for a trade, pretty much. Um, all that information will be provided in the description. Again, I'm Ross Davis L. I hope you enjoyed this. This is Journey Coaching with Ross. Peace.